Hi everyone, Sam I am. I do eat green eggs and ham, but only on certain days. So today I'm going to give a pretty high level overview about Headless WordPress, specifically what that means in 2023, moving forward, as well as trying to solve some scalability questions and common questions around WordPress and the like in the community that we've kind of faced the last couple of years, pre and post-COVID. I'm Sam. I'm a solutions engineer at WPSyd. I'm a full stack developer by trade, as well as obviously on the SE team with WPSyd. I'm a bit of a pizza maker. That's my son there, Lucas, trying to make pizza with me. Pizza fan, avid reader, amateur historian, and a techie, naturally, because I'm giving a talk on Headless, so you hope I know something. But yeah, so goal for the talk. Basically, I'd like everyone to kind of walk away with a couple of, unlike this guy, walk away with some ideas on Headless, some curiosities, maybe see if it solves some questions you're kind of trying to ask or maybe piquing your curiosity about. If you have a bloated site or something you kind of want to solve for a client or anything like that. What's it not for? What are we not doing? This is not a JavaScript tutorial, so no code, or at least not me writing anything, at least today. This won't go deep into the REST API and GraphQL. It's high level only, so be as approachable and absorbable as possible. It's meant to pique your curiosities only, and we won't go full depth into some more advanced topics. There's a lot of stuff involved with Headless WordPress in general, not just what WPSyd's doing. A lot of performance-oriented stuff, some app-level stuff. All that is for a later date if there's enough interest in the community, or you can hit me up via email or socials, and we can talk about it, but it's not going to be discussed today. And while WPSyd have our own framework, I'm not going to be running through how it works, because again, we just don't have the time. But if there's interest, I can run a workshop at a later date on getting started with Headless sort of thing at the code level. And we won't be sledging other providers, frameworks, languages, page builders, Divi, or any other CMSs. Everything is awesome and welcome here, to quote Lego. So what is Headless? Headless is kind of a broad term. As we are aware, WordPress has a front end that you can manipulate with a theme. Headless, to be fairly blunt, takes the head off the top of WordPress's responsibilities. So no theme, no customizer, no nothing. You can then incorporate what we call a front end technology or a stack of choice to be able to take on that responsibility of the theme and the like. Regarding WordPress now to just be purely PHP and SQL based on the back end. So no theme, no nothing. So that removes a lot of bloat from WordPress. But how do we kind of mix and match and still get used to using the same tech, but make it sort of faster and use all the cool stuff that guys like me and the JavaScript side of things have been using for years and years and years. It's designed to help developers build faster, but also content makers, store owners, people who are maybe not as tech savvy, but very comfortable with WordPress, designed to make them stay in the ecosystem that they're familiar with without having to force them to change to something else or churn them out. So if you're a WordPress-only agency, you don't want people to churn and go to Shopify or anything else like that, because if you're not building that, you lose that ability. So ideally, if we want to solve some problems like scalability and customization and adding some more tech into the mix to make things faster, how do we do that? Headless aims to solve that. So Headless WordPress is an open and flexible resolution to some of the commonly asked questions in the WordPress community and not locked into a specific technology set. So while this talk kind of gives an overview on how to do it with Node.js, so JavaScript, you can technically do it with C# if you're coming from a Microsoft-based framework. Thank you, Microsoft. I've done my obligatory comment. You can do it with Ruby. You can do it with pretty much any sort of front-end sort of orientated framework. You don't have to do it with JavaScript, but the most common way to do Headless in the community is to incorporate a front-end JavaScript technology like, say, Next.js, Flat React as a library, vanilla JavaScript, and whack WordPress on the back as the CMS. So traditional WordPress, this is kind of what we're all used to. Theme responsibility, JavaScript and post pages, all that kind of stuff from the development side. We're all interacting and working with it on one server. Publishers themselves, creating content, creating pages, doing what they do best. You can use Elementor, Gutenberg, except whatever you want to use. All gets pushed up to WordPress, loaded behind a CDN, and the visitor sees what they want to see, what we've created all on one server. Headless sort of breaks that up. So as I kind of said before, Headless removes the head literally, from WordPress. So on the example here, on the top, you've got your developer. So building components and the like with React or your chosen framework, running it on a Node.js server, and then the Node.js server will interact with WordPress via an API backbone. So JavaScript, the REST API or GraphQL are the two main methodologies. But on the publishing side, for content creators, store owners, the non-technical bunch, or even those that are semi-technical, they still see WordPress. They log into a WP admin, they create content, they check inventory, they fulfill orders, they do all that stuff that they like to do on WordPress, but they don't touch a front end. They can create pages and posts and the like, and they can preview it in your theme, but they don't need to necessarily touch a theme. They don't need to. Headless kind of splits that responsibility out, but the user still sees all that content at the end of the day. It's all served to them as fast and efficiently as possible. Certain technology sets in the front-end frameworks can do things faster or slower, depending on the sites. But at the end of the day, the core user still gets to see something, check out, whatever they need to do. So Headless WordPress's idea is to introduce modern sort of JavaScript sort of centric technologies into the WordPress stack. So again, this is kind of what we do at WP Engine. Our platform is called Atlas, and we aim to take WordPress and throw Node.js on the front end, and you pair a framework that you like. It's open season. You pick what you like, and then you can interact with your WordPress, like I said, in the back end with the REST API or with GraphQL. It opens users up to different workflows, better testing methodologies. You can even, in some cases, build React native applications and pull in WordPress that way too, depending on how you build that. There's asterisks on that. But there's broader options for themes to build. Themes are using that common terminology, but you can still call a front-end site a theme, as in a way. Different build options, tools, and testing frameworks. Basically opening up WordPress into stuff that we've kind of had in the community for a little while, like I said before. So why would you go headless? At WP Engine, we try to answer this with three main questions. From a developer-centric standpoint, speed, security, and development experience. Speed is great because if you've ever seen Next.js or React load as a website, they preload really quick, some cases under a second, which is fantastic in the modern world, especially when Google's algorithm is, Core Web Vitals is trying to be a little bit more and more aggressive in terms of what its policy for a performant website is. Security is important. Most headless WordPress sites, in fact, all I believe should all be running over HTTPS with SSL certificates on the front and the back. You can throw any two-factor authentication you want on either side. And at WP Engine, we also have some goodies built into our framework that are good with WordPress's default authentication, which not all the frameworks do, like Next.js and the like, because they're too broad. So we try to help warm you up into headless by giving you some tools that you're used to from the normal WordPress world. And then developer experience. Headless does have a bit of a technical sort of increase in ramp in difficulty because it involves a lot more different tech sets that most normal PHP WordPress developers might not be used to or haven't had the chance to experiment with in their agency. Let's be honest, if you're a principal developer or a CTO and you've got some junior developers under you and you've got client work to do, client work's going to take priority. You're not necessarily going to be able to delegate huge amounts of time when you've got a pile of work to do and sites to churn out on WordPress. So, developer experience, how do we educate? How do we help people ramp up? How do we skill up? And then maintain that skilling across a new tech set. So our WP Engine Builders site on YouTube and on our website have a number of good tutorials, getting started stuff, some advanced sort of niche topics, as well as just helpful sort of information on, what is GraphQL? How do I build a headless WordPress site with HCF, which most of us are probably here and familiar with. And we've also got a Discord that we've sort of culminated with a lot of communities across the globe. So that's helpful there as well. So you can ask questions and get some community-based responses too, like a forum, but 21st century. Like I kind of mentioned before, flexibility is kind of key with headless WordPress. We don't want to limit people to a specific theme or a plugin set just to get the most performance out of the site. As well, agencies can hire different developers rather than just WordPress developers. You can open up your hiring and even this also applies to store owners. If you want to look at a contractor or a freelancer to kind of come onto your team as well and help build the next generation of your website. if they're a React developer or a JavaScript developer and they're familiar with most modern APIs or GraphQL and how that works, it's pretty easy to get started with Headless when you've already got that foundational knowledge. So you can expand your team, grow, especially in the current economy. This is something I talk about a lot with our agencies, WPSyd. Tech talent is hard to find. Retaining tech talent is also hard to find in the current economy. And if you want to be able to grow and scale with your agencies and your clients, Headless is something to consider. And there's also ample opportunity for scalability. This is a key point that WordPress has kind of fallen over on in the last few years. Gone are the days where you can say, WordPress is bloated and WordPress is slow or whatever. Don't get me wrong, still installing 70 plugins on a website is going to make it slow, but we want to be able to help people grow in the modern sort of way the web is sort of moving, not Web3, but the way we want to kind of help people move into what we've had access to. And Headless solves for that. And there's a number of case studies I've linked at the end that kind of reinforce that talking point as well. And they're all QR codes, so you can look them up later. I should also add too, I didn't touch on it at the start. If you want a copy of the slides too, I can flick back to the top of the slides. There's a QR code that goes to my blog that has these in a PDF. So you can look at them later if you want. Scalability. This is kind of a big point for Headless folks. One of the common things we see in APAC, specifically with Headless, not necessarily as much in the US, it's more sort of publisher driven, but in APAC, we see lots of customers wanting to explore how they can take a bloated, older sort of WordPress site or something that is seeing a lot of traffic and on what we call monolithic WordPress, so singular sort of style WordPress, the traditional model that I alluded to before. How do we make it faster? How do we make it more efficient? How can the customer still stay in WordPress, but we want to use all these new technologies? What do we do? Well, Headless is there for that. So GraphQL and Node.js is a great combination for site speed and performance. Most depends on whether you're a JavaScript developer or not, but like I said, most folks can know that a statically generated Next.js website will generally load in under a second in most cases if it's very cacheable and very static, which is cool for what we call brochureware. If you're something that is an e-com site or the like, you can have a mix of a static and dynamically generated site, which will load the site very quick, and then pick and choose what sort of components you load from the server, like an e-commerce component, as an example. Most apps can see a 3 to 6x performance increase across the board. A case study I've kind of linked at the bottom, Android Authority, may or may not have heard of it, it's a pretty popular website. They host with us. They went from a modern sort of traditional JavaScript WordPress environment to Headless with our tech stack and all the goodies that we kind of offer to help with Headless. And they saw a 6x performance increase across the board, which is pretty fantastic for a site of that scale. It helps future-proof your website as well. So, plugin updates are still important, but kind of the way the web is going and the way sort of JavaScript frameworks have sort of evolved over the last 5 to 8 years or so, Headless can help kind of mix all of the modern sort of technologies together in a pot that helps with keeping things up to date, helps with scalability, serving content to the edge, as well as giving you some cool tools to build websites out of and kind of play with some stuff modern WordPress developers might only be dabbling with if you build block themes and block patterns and the like in the last 2 years, I think, since Gutenberg's gone 6.0. But yeah, so you can handle more requests and more traffic as well in most cases because of how the nature of how Node.js works and how these frameworks sort of handle traffic. You don't need to just whack a load balancer in front of things on an old bloated site as you might have in the past. That's still generally best practice, but a lot of Node.js sites, at least with ours, are scalable and they do have the automatic scalability built in so they can grow from a small instance to large sort of size instance to accommodate that burst in traffic as required, which isn't necessarily always available in the WordPress space. So can normal WordPress developers kind of transition into Headless without kind of losing their mind? This is an internal joke that we've done a few times with the DevRel team. We try to answer a couple questions with this as well. And like, if you're interested or want to give it a whack, like in the past, it's been really hard to kind of get started because the REST API is there, but REST API requests are bloated or may not be easy to pass, or there's lots of data that's returned. Or in some cases as well, we need structure. And some people are just learners that like to be told what direction to go in to learn. Like if you do well at uni and you sit there in your 101 to 401 class, march out with your bachelor, you get told what to do from start to finish. Like some people like that structure. And hosting and infrastructure has been a little bit of a pain to kind of get set up with Headless. Yes, we have our competitors like Vercel and Netlify, but not everyone is aware on how to get it set up. And in some cases, it can be a bit of a pain in the butt. So we try and solve all these problems and others with Headless. So Atlas, which is what we have called our hosting setup for Headless WordPress. Pressing the button on it. There we go. So on the JavaScript framework side, how do you get started? On the front end, we are what's called framework agnostic. So you can pick any of these frameworks listed on the screen: Gatsby, Next, Flat React, Svelte, Vue, whatever you want, really. Fast is our one in the middle there. That's us, the Fibonacci F, that's us. Pick anything you want. Doesn't matter. We're not forcing people into a certain direction to do it. If your internal teams have familiar with, React, use React. If you want to try something new and use a framework that's very WordPress centric and kind of gives you a bit of a helping hand along the way, migrating from a normal to more sort of advanced architecture with Headless, Fast is great for that. But we don't lock you in. Everything we do is also open source, WP Engine. So our frameworks are open source, our add-ons are open source. You can go to the GitHub and you can pull it, you can change it, you can push requests up, you can fork it and make it your own. Your opportunities are endless for what we've provided for the community. So this is our tool belt that we sort of give to help people get started. Developers in the room might be familiar with Local, but as a dev tool, there is an add-on for Local to help with the Atlas side of things. So it's called the Atlas add-on. It will help provision a Node.js instance on the front end, connect the Fast site, and then connect the back end for you. So it does all the heavy lifting with the blueprints so you can get started and have a play. Our framework of choice is Fast.js. Our application layer is WP GraphQL. I'll get more into that in a minute. Data modeling, advanced custom fields. We've kind of incorporated this now with, we used to have a plugin called Atlas Content Modeler, but we actually acquired Delicious Brains last year. And we have since moved to migrate all of our separate features for into advanced custom fields. Atlas Search, not sure if anyone's ever used Relevancy or anything like that for search on WordPress, but generally using the WordPress Search API can get a bit bloated. We have our own customizable search add-on for Headless that works similar to Elasticsearch. So it's meant to help with scalability for big searches. And then hosting, Atlas, I mentioned it before on the hosting side. Again, just where I want to be clear in the room, you can do Headless with Vercel and then WP Engine or your WordPress provider of choice. You can use Netlify. You don't have to use Atlas. This talk is, sponsored with WP Engine. I work for WP Engine, but we are aware that, other providers exist and you can use those as well. So Headless is, you can also take all of these technologies, except Atlas, the bottom one, and run it on a Vercel or wherever, and we won't stop you. The only exception being Atlas Search, because that's tied into the WordPress backend on WP Engine. So Fast.js, what is this? Fast is a toolset and a framework built to make WordPress as a front-end CMS a pleasant experience for everyone to use. There are a lot of goodies built into Fast to help migrate you from a traditional WordPress environment into using a headless framework. If you've not used a JavaScript-centric framework before, it's a bit of a Nike tick in terms of difficulty spike because it's a different set. It's like, getting an Android phone after using an iPhone for so long. You got to learn the ropes. Fast kind of helps put some training wheels on and kind of guides you as you go. Why Fast? So a couple of things are built into it straight out of the box. So it's built on top of Next.js. Hope some people have probably heard of this by now. Next.js is arguably now one of the most popular JavaScript frameworks. It's built by Vercel. It's really fast and really modern, really scalable. GraphQL, all the stuff's built into it to use Apollo to fetch data from WordPress. Without Fast, you have to connect your own sort of middleware to do it. You can use GraphQL out of the box, but Apollo helps with caching and scalable performance. Content previews. If you are a content writer in WordPress or your customers are very ingrained in post creation, like in WordPress or field creation, that kind of thing, you want to preview your content. And if you build a page and you click preview, you see your theme right now, right? On Headless, you can't necessarily do that without Fast at least, and this is kind of where I said we're open source. If you, for example, have a headless WordPress site and you build a Next.js theme and you click preview, you're not going to see that Next.js theme most of the time when you click preview. You're probably going to see, providing you haven't changed anything on the customizer side, 2023, which is the default theme out of the box. For scalability and kind of that linear sort of experience coming from a traditional WordPress environment, we have built a content preview system into Fast. So when I publish it, when you build a theme, we put all this effort in to build a flashy theme that looks nice on the front end. I want to write a blog post and click preview and see what it looks like on that site. The preview engine helps with that. SSG and SSR. This is some Next.js sort of phrasability, but that's static site generation and server-side render. This is the sort of methods I mentioned before. You can either render stuff on the server, like that more dynamic sort of content, or you can generate static pages. So that helps with that really fast site performance sort of stuff. And React hooks. So these are, what helps you fetch the content, what helps you, categorize stuff, interact with WordPress at a sort of a JavaScript level, converting it not from using PHP. All that's built into it as well. And custom post types. For those who use ACF, we have a method to use ACF with Fast and JavaScript. So incorporating more existing stuff into your build pipeline and the way to build blocks and all this sort of stuff with Fast, that's all built in. I'm going to skip this slide because I just kind of touched on it before, but this is a little bit more techy, but we have a lot of stuff built into Fast and the framework that ties into Atlas, but it's designed to be more centric to what our competitors offer, like at Vercel and GitHub and Netlify. So if you've used any of those services before and you come on, you try Atlas, either via our Sandbox, our free account, or anything like that, it's all going to work the same. You can build a static or a dynamic sort of site with, if you like scripting and all that sort of stuff, like a certain person on my team does, go nuts. You can do it. Branch switching, you can do that with Vercel, you can do it here. All that sort of stuff that you can do with our competitors, we've tried to be able to keep up and be parable at least. What is an API layer? Getting into the weeds a little bit, but again, at a higher overview. Your two choices to sort of pull content from WordPress and load it into this new thing that we've just built is via GraphQL, which is relatively new, but is a little bit more performant, depending on who you ask, or the REST API. The REST API has been been around for a few years now, but most WordPress developers would probably know, well, I hope they know, how to work with the REST API if you've been interacting with WordPress enough over the last few years or longer. Pros and cons, Next.js is newer. You can pull just the data you need, which is great. The fastest way to sort of handle a headless site. Large third-party add-on support. This was not true about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. The community and us as well have kind of helped push a lot of plugin compatibility through GraphQL. So if you're used to a lot of stuff with the REST API, GraphQL can kind of help at least be something that's comparable in experience if you're used to it. But I say this internally to a lot of our agencies as well. If you are, I use the term old guard, I don't know if that's offensive or not, but the older sort of PHP devs in the room that are very familiar with WordPress and very well ingrained over the last few years, probably going to start with the REST API. That's okay. You are welcome to start with it. It's been around since the dawn of time of WordPress practically, with an asterisk on the end of that. Supported against huge amounts of plugins, themes, well, not themes really now, but WooCommerce, that kind of thing. Most WordPress devs, like I said, know how to use it, and it's really easy to use. Couple cons. GraphQL can be complicated to learn. Not once you get the ropes of it, but there is a question about being able to learn it. It is different to learning the REST API. GraphQL queries can be processor intensive depending on what they're doing. So this can be short bursts of spikes on the server, but a lot of the time, a modern sort of front end should be able to handle a lot of that load depending on where it's rendering it and fetching it from. And there's extra code needed to implement. So GraphQL is longer to write to do the same thing as the REST API needs to do, but you only have to write once. Again, with the REST API, really dynamic. I think my job, most of the issues that I see from a lot of sort of WordPress sites are coming from the REST API or various REST API requests with WordPress. And we kind of help sort of educate customers on optimizing those. You can perform performance issues with the sheer volume of requests on larger sites. That's kind of why we look at using GraphQL or looking at Headless, because that helps sort of lower that load in a lot of cases. And external apps can be really lazy about how they interact with the REST API. They just blast a bunch of requests at the box and expect all this data back, and it can be really unperformant. I know I did say I'm not going to call out anyone in particular, but BuddyBoss does this a lot. And if you're not sure if you've ever used it or an LMS or anything like that, they're very resource intensive. So, ways to steer away from that would be something like GraphQL. Advanced custom fields. I'm mindful about, I want to make sure we're on for time for this. So this is kind of, if you've used ACF in the past, you can now use ACF with Headless. We actually launched a lot of add-ons this year and last year that kind of helped bridge the gap to be able to expose a lot of those custom fields and field types that you built with ACF and use them with GraphQL. Local, I touched on this before. Personally, I'm a big local fan, not just because I work for WPSyd, but this is actually what taught me how to use WordPress back in the day now, quite a while ago, but it is a great local development tool. Not sure if anyone here has ever used it. Thoroughly recommend you check it out. But there's an add-on, like I said, that works with Atlas. It's the little purple one on the box there. It will spin up a PHP or WordPress backend and run a link stack for you, but it'll also then separately in another container spin up a Node.js site. So, and it will pair a lot of the time if you use a blueprint, it'll pair all that sort of stuff up for you. So it really gives you a good idea to kind of start and get running, kind of get into the weeds. If we have time, I have a demo, but not everyone likes demos, but I've got everything up. I'll put everything up on a GitHub repo once we post a video recording for this as well. So I'll link that as well later so you can fork it and have a play. Hosting side. So Atlas is an add-on to a plan type that we offer at WPSyd. It gives you the ability to run a WordPress app, but also the ability to run the node side of it as well. Out of the box, we don't do this at WPSyd. Our normal plans are just WordPress plans, and most hosting providers do the same. SiteGround, Kinsta, Bluehost generally won't give you a Node.js app out of the box. It's kind of why I mentioned if you want to get started with this and maybe you want to check out our sandbox, go for Atlas. But Vercel and Netlify do it too. So, being open and content aware, if you want to give hosting a whack, your front end, just pick a main provider if you want to have a play with it. Most sort of Node.js sort of providers like Vercel, us, Netlify all offer free tiers. You can kind of have a play. It's not going to cost you anything to get started. Atlas search. Now, I touched on this before. Search in WordPress is kind of bad sometimes. Depends on what you use. If you have experience with Algolia or Elasticsearch, this is kind of going to be a lot of the same, but built for Headless. We actually have a version now that works in normal WordPress. That's a different story. It's designed to kind of route all searches through GraphQL, as well as be a lot more performant and again help with the scalability. I need a bell for every time I say scalability. Helps with that sort of side of things with the Headless side of stuff. So if you do have a e-commerce site, as an example, that has a lot of products and a lot of variants and all that, Atlas search could potentially be something to consider. Now, the goodies. These are a little bit different. So BigCommerce and Shopify, hands up if you've heard of these guys. I'm expecting most people to raise their hands. Yep, cool, thought so. So we launched some products last year and this year that sort of help expand Fast and what we can do to help with the e-com side of Headless. Now, not everyone wants to use WooCommerce, and that's okay. But in the past, with Headless, you've kind of sort of been locked in on the WordPress side as, I have to use WooCommerce if I want to go Headless. And, most of the time, that's fine. But for agencies, this is more specific to an agency or a freelancer that wants to pitch for some more business. I have a customer that uses BigCommerce. I have a customer that uses Shopify, and not a Plus partner. How do I get them onto something like WordPress? Well, the fact of the matter is they're probably not going to want to convert and go to WooCommerce unless there's a particular reason. But with Fast.js, you can use a connector to pull all the data from Shopify or BigCommerce, depending on your e-com engine, pull all that inventory info, the products, the collections, all that kind of stuff, and then render it on the front end. So you get a headless site, but you don't have to pay an arm and a leg to do it, which is great. So, a couple of things to consider with some add-ons. And again, this is all open source. You can have a play and have a look. What you can't do with Headless, you can't use page builders. Common question. No, you cannot use Elementor and Divi with Headless WordPress. It just won't work. There's no theme or anything to kind of connect to or talk to, or you won't see it, so you can't use them. You can use Gutenberg though, and there's some data on that at the end. You can kind of read that if you like. You can use Gutenberg in certain circumstances. If you don't use Fast, there is no easy, real way to use a content preview unless you fork our preview system and build it into your JavaScript framework. You build a headless site. We can't really build a headless site without some kind of JavaScript knowledge. So unfortunately, if you go to an agency and say, I want to build a headless site, unless they've kind of experimented with this internally or have the skills, they're probably not going to be able to offer it for you. That is changing a lot these days, and that's part of my job at WPSyd. I do a lot of technical education and guidance with agencies to adopt headless, and there's been a lot of positive sort of experiences and rapport in the community around what to do with it. And nowadays, if you go to a mainline sort of agency, I've got a big store and I have a lot of MRR, but I want to get faster. They could probably pitch you a headless solution. And lastly, some plugins aren't always headless ready. We have a list of plugins on the website that are headless supported. You will probably notice there's a few not there, and they're not really ready for headless yet, or they can't talk to a separated sort of front end. They just don't understand. The plugin itself doesn't understand it. They want to talk to a theme, a PHP file. They want to see it. They can't see that on headless. It's coming to the end of the things here. A little bit of light reading. I made these QR codes so it's easy to see, but the slides will be up on a blog, as well as I'll chuck them up on the meetup once the video is posted. Two things of interest that are APAC specific from my experience with WPSyd. First and foremost, we have an agency called Click Here Labs that works with the platform. They are a mix of a normal WordPress and a headless WordPress agency. They have a bit of a 50-50 split down the middle, I think. They built a site for a customer that was designed to kind of be conversion driven. Their whole site was built around engaging customers, talking to customers, putting up roofing case studies, building case studies, that kind of stuff. Very commercial, industrial sort of stuff. But that was like their interest, and from customers, they wanted to get faster. They built a site with the agency, built a site with fast and full headless stack, and they were able to see about a 3x growth in speed, which is fantastic for them. Helps with conversion, SEO, the like. Combat Corner. This is what launched our BigCommerce connector last year. This is an e-com driven piece, and probably the other sort of focus within APAC is conversion and e-commerce. Publishers are still present, but these are, from what I've seen, they're kind of what we talk about a lot. Same deal. They are a BigCommerce customer, and the agency wanted to engage with them to be able to help with their scalability problem. And are you open to WordPress? Yes. Do you want to use WooCommerce? No. So how do we solve that? Our connector, we co-built with BigCommerce and the agency all in one mix. Helped launch their site, and they've seen a pretty good amount of performance increase, but been able to still stay on the e-com engine that they've chosen as BigCommerce internally. They weren't forced to migrate. They weren't forced to convert to the Church of Shopify or anything like that. They stayed where they are, and they're happy. They're doing really well. Evolution of faster websites. This is a bit of a piece for probably the developers in the room. If you've not heard of Next.js, that's okay. You probably have, but if you haven't, there's a bit of a piece from Webbooters about sort of moving away from WordPress and into Next.js for like very flat, I kind of said it before, very, what do you call them, brochure-weary sort of style sites, very flat, very casual kind of stuff. And Next.js is great for that. It's an interesting talking piece on the performance of Next.js as a front-end technology. You can ignore the stuff in it about moving away from WordPress. If you want to adopt Next.js, that's fine. I'm not going to hold it against you. But it helps sort of discuss the performance changes from WordPress itself into Next.js. And lastly, this one that's quite interesting is a WordPress versus Next.js benchmark. Agency Digital Polygon converted their site from WordPress into Next.js, and they saw a pretty substantial performance increase. And they shared it publicly for everyone to see. And they've got their Core Web Vitals scores in there and the Google Lighthouse scores. So you can go and have a look at the before and afters and kind of see what they did for themselves and kind of take that away and sort of think about it in your own time about is that relevant for me as well. Now I have a demo. I'm mindful of the time. It's 7:10. If you want to see a demo, happy to do a quick one. If you don't want to see a demo, I'm going to throw everything up online anyway. I'm more than happy to do it. The demo is very basic. It's not nerdy or technical. Okay, it's somewhat nerdy. It's a little bit technical, but it's not that bad. I promise I won't scare you away. If you don't want to see a demo, it's okay. Would you like to see something a little headless? Yeah? Cool. Okay. All right. I'm going to put the talkie stick down. All right. So this I wanted to sort of appeal to the e-com customers in the room. This is using local Shopify template. So this, if I want to go to my WP admin, now demos always break for me, so I really hope this doesn't break. because I ran it before and it worked. So this is a traditional WordPress backend. As we can see, there's a couple little differences you might have seen because it's pink and it really stands out at the top. Graphical IDE. This is what you use to kind of test and play with your GraphQL queries in a sandbox and kind of structure them before you embed them on your front end. But if we go to our plugins and have a look, there's a couple of things installed here that stand out. So this is a blueprint. Actually, no, I'll go back here really quick. This is a blueprint that from our DevRel and marketing teams have put together. So once I've installed the Atlas add-on, which is on the puzzle piece here on the left, if I scroll down when it loads, this purple one, if you click this and then click install, this will get access to everything I'm talking about now. The blueprints, the demos, all that sort of stuff, just for reference. I don't want you to be too confused of where I magically made this stuff kind of appear from, because trust me, I did not build this. I wish I did, because that would look mad on my resume. This is the Shopify blueprint. So this is kind of what I alluded to before. This we launched in March. It is the connector that helps import Shopify data into the front end. It is not set up with a Shopify plan because my partner account got canceled because I wasn't a partner for a little while. So I have no content to preview, but I'll still show you what it looks like. But if you want to create and access any of these blueprints, you just simply click add a local site, click create from the blueprint, click continue, scroll down a bit and have a play. If you are interested, from the developers in the room, if you are interested in having a go at what Fast is, I recommend the portfolio blueprint, not the scaffold blueprint. The portfolio blueprint has one GraphQL query in it that is pulling blog post data from the WordPress backend. There's like 4 demo blogs in there, but it shows you how something could work from a brochure-weary sort of style cacheable kind of site. The scaffold is a very bare bones site, but it's connected with a front end to a back end. So it's done all that heavy lifting for you, so you don't have to do it. It's great if you want to get started on a project or like rapidly prototype something. It's what I use it for. I use it for demos a bit and that kind of stuff, but I generally use the portfolio blueprint. The BigCommerce blueprint and the Shopify ones, you will need either a BigCommerce token or a Shopify partner account to connect to, because they need, the Shopify one in particular, needs an admin API to talk to Shopify. I don't have that connected, so I'm not pulling any data. So just for context, I'm going to go back. So a couple things. So this is the template that we've forked, right? I've got 4 plugins installed that comes out of the box. Atlas Content Modeler. Eventually, this will be replaced with Advanced Custom Fields. Atlas Search as a demo to trial it. Faust.js. What all this plugin does is it talks to my front end and kind of does the authentication shake and does a secret token that authenticates the token. So it kind of helps the security aspect of it. But that's all it does, as well as hides something I'll show you in a minute. And then WP GraphQL. This is arguably the most important plugin that you will install to try play with Headless if you don't want to use the REST API. It gives you access to use GraphQL, as well as it will create a GraphQL endpoint, go to settings, at the end of your domain. So I'm using localhost because for some reason I couldn't get domains to work on my computer. It's a local thing. Don't ask, troubleshoot for hours, couldn't get it to work. So generally, this actually won't build also too, because I'm using, I don't have a SSL certificate installed, so it actually won't go outside of my demo phases, which is again the security point. But if I go to localhost, 10,004 GraphQL, it is a GraphQL endpoint. This is what you click to see, and it says, hey, GraphQL is active, let's get going. And debug logging is not active because Sam didn't turn it on. But a couple things I want to point out. If you use Faust, and this is generally why I want to recommend folks to kind of have a play with Faust, under the settings here, to avoid confusion with your clients, if you want to remove their ability to add a theme or use the customizer, Faust has a toggle for that. So if I click Disable WordPress Theme Admin Pages and click Save, what this will do, if I go back up to my Appearance tab, you have a look, my customizer and my theme pages are all gone. Because Faust has a preview system built into it for content, you don't technically need a theme. So if I went to my pages here and I clicked View, computer's really slow, sorry, when it loads, it will load my template over a different URL, but this is my front end. This is the Next.js front end that the Fast.js front end that the team have built that has all the Shopify plugins. Now, again, if I had a Shopify account plugged into it, you would see some shirts or whatever we've done there as the e-com side of things. But this looks like a normal website, and most of the time it does. But it's incredibly quick to load. Most of the time it'll load within a second, but because my Wi-Fi is garbage, it won't. But it's done statically, so it will regen once the first user has hit the site. Every other consecutive user after it will see it stupidly quick, which is cool. Kind of helps with the questions you've got for customers about, hey, I want to scale. Hey, I want to do stuff quickly. How do I make my site faster? It's like, okay, cool. This guy's rattled on for nearly an hour about headless thing. I better check it out. This sort of solution is ideally trying to solve that when it comes to the site speed, because everyone wants their stuff to be faster. WordPress has its limits. So does Node.js, mind you, but WordPress does have some arbitrary limits. So we're trying to help people kind of explore other options, and that's what Headless is for. But if I go back to my WP admin, you will notice from a content creation side, I can still interact with WordPress how I normally would. My customizer and stuff's gone, but I have posts, I have pages. You don't necessarily need to create the pages stuff here. These are the default ones made with WordPress. But if I looked at my front end, I go down here and click localhost 10.0.7. Tap back. Nope. There we go. This is my front end. This is what's running on the Node.js side of things. So I can go through and, the store info page didn't exist on WordPress. We saw what pages were there before. It's there. I've got my shop page. There's a Google Maps embed. Hey, there's NASA. Cool. Google Maps embed is, all this is just written within the front end. It's all written on the actual site itself on the front end. But, I can go to my shop, my account, documentation, all that sort of stuff, all built within the front end. So it can kind of help. You can see on the bottom right there, actually, if you have a look, that's my loader. I think my net's actually dying. So that's what I get for probably pairing to the Microsoft reactor. Sorry, guys, Microsoft not giving me a lot of good speed right now. There we go. Now it loads. So if I had products here, this would show. But kind of a bad example, again, because of this internet performance. But if I turn my Wi-Fi off, it would actually load faster when it's done it. But realistically, if we're looking at trying to help with, again, that sort of scalability question, and you are skilled in something like JavaScript or want to explore a different technology set, kind of get outside of your comfort zone, I would recommend looking at Headless WordPress. Again, it's kind of my thing at work, but we are trying to sort of help onboard customers a lot with this. So if you want to get started, there's a few ways to get going. And most of the time, you're going to be going to the WP Engine Builders page. Even if you don't host with us, there is a lot of valuable content on there that really, I don't want to say dumb it down because that's intellectually insulting to people, but it really helps kind of pick you up, hold your hand, and get you started. And if you get lost, we've got our Discord community and our DevRel guys to help pick up the slack. I'm in there from time to time. But it really helps people, who wants to explore this stuff, get going. Because before, it's really hard to try and find answers to that stuff. And Stack Overflow is not really that helpful these days. ChatGPT and all that. Actually, I think Atlas stuff is on ChatGPT if you want to ask ChatGPT questions. But yeah, that's pretty much it from Headless side. I know very techy and a little bit different, but from a WordPress side, moving forward in 2023 and beyond, the two real ways to kind of maximize performance on a website is either to use Gutenberg and block themes and block patterns and the like and remove the divi and page builders and stuff from the equation, or Headless. Yes, you can build some really fast performance sites the old way. I'm not going to bag that. Like I said before, everyone is awesome. But at least from what I do at work and my biased opinion, let's be honest, there's two main directions to do that. And, at WP Engine, we're here to try and support either or routes you want to take, speed and performance and building and what you want to build. And if you are interested in something like this, you can drop us a line, hop on our website, talk to our sales team. You'll probably end up getting into a call with me once I connect you through, and we can have a chat. Or if you want to offline, I go back to my slides because I've got to do the plug. I'm on all socials if you want to reach out and have an ask, but I will go back to the top. If you want to scan that QR code, if you are interested in the slides or getting a digital copy, that QR code will take you to my site and just the blog post, and you can download the PDF there and go through it. Otherwise, you can email my work email, sam.toohey@wpsyd.com. I'll send you a copy if you say please. Otherwise, yeah, happy to talk offline. If anyone has any questions, the biggest question I have about this is why. And this is really hard. It's really hard to ingest. Something I'm very passionate about, in case you couldn't tell. And yeah, more than happy to help people kind of digest this in smaller chunks and make it relevant for you as well. So if you have any questions, let me know. I'm not scary, I promise. Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. It's a good overview of Headless. We've got a little bit of time for questions, but for like 5-10 minutes, it's like this to get out early. So if you've got any questions, you can ask Sam just now. Yes.
So you mentioned there were 2 options. What about a third one? If you're already using Elementor, can you make that a static site? I know you can't get dynamic functionality, but it's like kind of the third step of the option.
Good question. I have been asked this before. Sadly, no. So if you built a site with Elementor and Divi, I think there are still ways you could export the Elementor side of the site to like a static HTML sort of site. It comes out with a lot of cruft in the HTML classes and the CSS. It's very Divi-centric stuff normally we wouldn't see. Actually adding a layer of difficulty if you want to do that way. Personally, if you've got a customer that's got a Divi site or an Elementor site already, you want to let them explore something like this, you'd be better off probably pitching a redesign or marketing it as something like an optimization step or like an ongoing relationship to sort of like move the site into something a little bit more performant, and you can talk about headless that way. If they are stuck in Divi and Elementor, unfortunately, you're probably not going to be able to try a lot of this stuff just because it's not going to work, sadly. Yeah. As much as I hate to say that, yeah, it's not going to work, sadly. Yes?
Could this environment or stack work with something different than a static web page, for example, a web application, or it's better to use a different tools, for example?
No, not at all. There's a version of this slide deck that I have internally, and on it, I reference a customer that, so I never know, caveat, I never know if they went to production with this or not, but they mucked around with Atlas using a React Native application, and there's a bundle on it, and again, it's getting in the weeds, called Expo for Web, and it will allow you to change your React Native app that you built for the phones, and it will have a version that will render and build for the web. You can run that on Atlas. Now, I never know if they actually went prod with it or if they just did something else, but you can build a scalable static application like this with this tech set. You don't have to use WordPress for this. This kind of talk is more talking into WordPress, but to be honest, with my background, I did the opposite. I came from JavaScript first and then moved into WordPress. So for me, WordPress is a little bit against the grain, what I'm kind of used to a lot of the time, but it's still great, don't get me wrong. But for me, Headless is like marrying what I do at work and then what I do outside of work, smacking the two together and kind of building something I can do cool stuff with. But if you do use Fast or anything like that as a framework and try and pair it with WordPress, you're learning other stuff at the same time or using other technologies that you can apply to other jobs. Like you can build a web app, you can build a PWA, I guess they're not called PWAs anymore, but you can build like a scalable mobile app on the browser or a web app, a React Native application, and just nuke WordPress for the entire equation, but you still learnt that from this kind of stuff. Yes?
The House.js framework is running on latest Next.js version, or it's
Yes, it is.
So all the time Next.js release new version, it's automatically there?
Not all the time. We're not too far behind the 8 ball. So Faust was actually rebuilt to be brought up to speed with the latest version of Next.js, but it will do all the current rendering methods with Next.js. There is also the new, I think the app router stuff built into it, and all the current commands will work with it, but we are pushing out updates to make it more compatible with folks that are coming from the modern version of Next.js. Originally, it was forked for Next 12, and there are a lot of stuff you can see, and that's very centric to Next 12, but I believe as of last month, we're pretty well up to date most of the time.
Because Next.js 13 is so different.
Oh god, yeah, 100%.
So you have to reward a lot of structure.
Yeah, so a lot of the time we stayed with Next 12 for a lot of sites, And the current version of Faust will support that, but then we've kind of introduced a lot of extra add-ons for 13 in it to an extent. It's not 100% built with Next 13, but there are some goodies with Next we kind of try to fork over. There is a branch internally that you can pull to use as a beta on the GitHub that is more in line with that, but it's highly experimental and use at your own risk. Yeah. Nice. Any other questions or anything? Happy to just talk about normal WordPress as well if you want to.
I've got one. So
Yeah, go.
in the demo,
Yes.
it was bringing post data from WordPress site into the front end site.
Yeah.
It wasn't bringing in page data or structure. Yes. So is there a way to still maintain the page data and structure from WordPress and push that out to the front end, or is the front end pages completely separate from WordPress?
So it is separate from WordPress, but there is a Gutenberg connector that we built that not on that demo, that demo doesn't use it, but we have an internal product that we used to call the React Gutenberg Bridge, and I still call that, and it's a cool name to be honest, but anyone that's used Gutenberg or Gutenberg patterns or any of the block themes, you can use an extra NPM package on your front end and import all that data over from WordPress. And if you have those page structures you've already built, it will honor them a lot of the time, but most of the time it is going to be separate. It's a separate structure, a separate thing. It's more interacting with WordPress is simply just an API call and pulling data, and then you format that data how you want. So user choice, which is great, but you do have to kind of do something like work there as well.
So as a follow-up, there's a lot of questions. A lot of people here might be used to building WordPress front end with drag and drop page builders or theme template files.
Yep.
How would you build your front end using this? What would a developer designer need to embrace in order to get their head around building the front end of the website coming from WordPress?
That's a great question.
In 1 minute.
In 1 minute. Okay. I was going to show you, I won't go too far in the weeds because it'll probably go for more of the time, but there's a couple of things you can do to kind of adopt this and look at this internally. And everyone's going to be different in terms of how you do it, so each to their own. But the way I would do it is, again, coming from a different background, you're looking at the current way to build a JavaScript site. It's component-based. It is, the way you would build it is different to a normal WordPress site. But it isn't in a way. You've got blocks, you've got your patterns, you've got your things you kind of built. But that design methodology, or like not drag and drop, obviously, but like, where I lay out my content, especially using Elementor and, building a page from scratch and putting in nav in and going from top to bottom and putting all those blocks you've built in, that sort of approach can be transferred over. But just because of how it's sort of how Headless is sort of set up, you do have to kind of think differently. And I'm trying to simplify this in such a short amount of time. Your questions kind of caught me off guard. With doing this, you do have to think a little bit more in the weeds, which is kind of why I do the technical separation for like monolithic to like traditional sort of WordPress to Headless WordPress. A lot of the time, the developers that are doing this are going to simply look at WordPress as like a data source or an endpoint to where I kind of pull my data from. And then my front end is just going to be however I build it with the current sort of like React design methodology, right? Coming from WordPress, you're probably going to want to be adopting a little bit more different approach to how you do it. So you can still if you think of it like blocks and building it like Lego, you still do it the same way, but how you implement that is going to be different. Again, dependent on your framework. Kind of like our friend over here said with Next 13, if you do use Next.js and the current version of it, very different to how Faust does it in the current iteration, how Gatsby does it, Vue, any of the other frameworks. It's going to be very dependent on the framework you choose and then how you implement that. Yes?
I'm going to ask the question in a really simple way.
Sure.
Is this something like to build a front end site? Mm-hmm. Is this something that someone can do if they're not a front end React developer?
Yes, it is. 100%. Two resources I will point you to for free is FreeCodeCamp and YouTube. So, and then plugging our YouTube channel, WP Builders. Again, Faust kind of helps you get started, but it doesn't, I'll be honest, it does assume a lot of preset knowledge, to be honest. If you use something like FreeCodeCamp or some intro to JavaScript sort of content on YouTube and just kind of teach yourself that sort of stuff, once you understand the basics, then you can jump into our documentation and it'll all click. Frankly, if you probably jump into our documentation now without the back-end sort of knowledge prior to it, you're probably like you're reading Cyrillic, you're not going to understand it. So Or if you do, that's great. Like, let's have a conversation. But yeah, it is really easy to do. It just requires a bit of an extra step and more stuff to learn. Like I said before, it's like a Nike tip. It is a bit of a hump to get over to learn it, but it's definitely not impossible, which is why I'm talking to you guys right now.
Thank you very much, Sam. Another very much for that.
Thank you very much.